Hi, thank you very much for joining me. Today's video I'd like to show you from the very start how to make your own textured paste to apply to painting as a base for something a little bit abstract. I have shown this painting before, but I'm going to do something slightly different this time. But I wanted to show you, if you didn't want to buy a proprietary texture paste, how you could actually start to make your own. It's very straightforward. You need white acrylic paint or some beige. This is buff titanium. It doesn't matter if it's actually quite a cheap paint because it's only going to be mixed up with some sand. You can use gesso if you prefer, white gesso, clear gesso or a coloured gesso. It's absolutely fine, whichever you feel. What I've actually got here is an old sort of a sweet pot or dessert pot. Not quite sure what this had in it, but it's a good size. You need enough that you can make a reasonable sized amount for your project, and until you've sort of put it on you're not quite sure, so it's best to make too much. You can always use it again for something else. This is one that I've made in preparation for this, which I've used, put on the sheet, and this is what's left, which I've covered with cling film, and that's actually stayed perfectly usable now for a couple of days and will continue to. So I will use that onto another canvas or another piece of paper. So along with your mixing pot, I have a bag of sand, which is dry sand. And that's quite important because if there's any moisture in it, it's obviously going to add moisture to your paint. So the drier the better. You can get play sand, you can use builder's sharp sand, you can use whatever sand is best for you. It's probably going to have colour on it anyway, so it's not going to retain a sand kind of shade, as long as it's dry. So if it isn't when you buy it, just dry it out naturally and let it do its thing. So I use a measuring cup for putting the sand into the paint. This is an old pudding cup, a plastic pudding cup. It's probably about 1 inch in depth by about 2 inches diameter, and I may probably not use all of this sand. So basically you're going to pour your paint into your pot, a really good size, and then add the sand and mix it as you go along. I've used to use the end of an old paintbrush to mix it up with. Okay. Or you can use a knife or a spatula, whichever is easiest for you. The beauty of using a clear pot is that you will see that from the bottom you can see whether your sand's actually mixed well into the paint or not. You can keep adding paint and keep adding sand as long as you need. So make sure that you've got enough for your project. There's nothing worse than running out halfway through and thinking, oh no, I've got to mix some more up. So do plenty, and then we'll move on to the next stage of actually putting it onto the paper. So here I'm starting applying it to the paper with one of the Catalyst silicone spatulas. It's great for getting plenty on, so I'm using this to just get a rough shape of what I want to produce in the long run. At this point you just really want to get the texture paste onto your support and start to mould it into the directions that you want. It's just a question of keeping going, building up the layers, keeping swirling your texture paste into the sort of built up areas and the flat areas as well. In a little while I will change to my palette knives, and there is a difference in the application to those. They tend to actually make it a lot smoother. The Catalyst applicator here kind of keeps the texture quite rough, so it's quite nice to get that really grainy surface to work on. And don't forget, you can also remove little pieces and move them to other places. You're not fixed at this point, everything is still very pliable, so don't be afraid to take stuff off and move it around if you should wish to. And it's not wasted because you can just put it into another area. So it's fine. It's all going to be painted anyway, so you won't see any layers or bits that have residue that have been left. So basically start sculpting. The blue thing that I'm just moving out of the way there is actually just a silicone spoon, which again is quite useful for scooping out the paste and putting it onto the page. I had it there just in case. So this is my smaller palette knife, and it's giving me sort of knife marks as I like to use, and it's making the texture paste a little bit smoother in the application. So we're just going to carry on now and keep building our picture, and hope you will get the idea. Okay, so now we've got our base. We basically sculpted the texture paste, the paint and sand mixture into the sort of shape that we want. Obviously now it needs to dry, and it's going to take quite a while in places where we've put it on quite thickly. So it basically has to just be left now until it feels absolutely dry, and then we will come back to it and we'll start painting. Okay, so now you can see that I've actually fastened down this watercolour board onto a firm board surface. It's much easier on a board that I can actually move it if I want to, so hopefully you can see that. So all I've done, once the sand was completely dry, and to make sure of that, you obviously, if there's any light sort of light colour areas, it's probably still moist. It will go darker once it's dry, so just check for any areas that are slightly darker. They're probably dry. Leave it a good couple of days, especially the areas that are thick applied. It's going to take longer. Here we are ready to go now. I have got my entire piece covered with a good layer of thick titanium white acrylic paint, so we're all prepped and ready to go. And here on the right hand side, as you will see, I've actually put some of the colours that I'm intending to incorporate in this. So we have a nice variety of colours. We've got a dark Prussian blue, dark ultramarine, burnt sienna, turquoise, which I always think goes so really well with burnt sienna, some bright yellow, which may or may not get in there. These colours are just a trial. Some will be used, some may not be, but really now I've got a good idea of what I want to incorporate and how I want it to turn out, so we're all ready to paint. Thank you so much for joining me for that. I really hope that you've enjoyed the whole process of making your own texture paste and being able to actually put together the base that you want to work on. The beauty of the texture is that it gives lots of interest as you start to paint it, and you get different sort of effects coming out of it. So in my next video I will share the time-lapse video of how I've painted this base. It will be very abstract, and hopefully you'll find it very interesting and maybe give you some ideas of how you can paint your own. Thank you so much for joining again. Don't forget to hit the subscribe and the little bell button, and then you'll be informed of when the video is out. Thanks again. Bye bye.